Hey guys, I'm here talking about Call of Duty World at War. So it was an interesting thing that the Call of Duty series was managed by two different studios, Infinity Ward and Treyarch. And Treyarch was the more, I guess, maybe traditional Call of Duty since it was stayed to the World War II aesthetic. However, this game came out after the massive success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and this was the next installment in the series that really even though it stuck to its roots, it was innovating and adopting the new mechanics brought into by Modern Warfare. And so these are very similar and very different games in a lot of interesting ways. Personally, I've said this before, I just hate World War II as a setting for action. I don't know why. I just find it boring, contrived, and done over a million times. And it's just like, I'm just never surprised or interested by what they do. I always want something kind of new and interesting, and a modern, like, SAS kind of setting where they're taking out a modern target sounds just a lot more interesting. Wow, this is like just, well, in the past, more or less. Again, it's interesting how in this game there are not a lot of strong characters except for basically Reznov in the Russian campaign, and I think it's so funny that they basically turn him into like an actual likable, interesting character. In terms of the Call of Duty series, I would say the most memorable characters have been Captain Price and probably Reznov are the respective most interesting characters who actually have any kind of depth or weight in the series. Also, I never liked the whole kind of stylized opening to these missions where they try to, look at it as if it were World War II, drawing board. Because Modern Warfare just has a very better aesthetic, a better dialogue, honestly, and a better overall campaign. That being said, how do I feel about the campaign at World War? So, you have the Americans in the Japanese campaign, and you have the Russians in the Eastern and German campaign. And what's funny is they actually portray the takeover and the Battle of Berlin, which is something that I feel isn't usually seen, simply because the Americans don't want to admit that they didn't actually fully defeat the Germans, but their allies did it, quote unquote. And then immediately after the war, they became their enemies. I mean, that's a completely different subject, I think, for another time. So it's interesting that you get both perspectives of what was going on at this time. And again, it was really, the campaign is fine. It's not terrible or anything. But, when you are introduced to Reznov and you have to do this little sniper mission, and initially you're in this zone where everyone's dead, and he kind of rolls over and says, to be quiet, and that he's going to take out, you fire the gun as the planes are flying overhead, not to alert the other guards. It's a pretty memorable sequence, though. As I said, though, in my Call of Duty review for Modern Warfare, I think the sniper mission there in Ukraine or whatever by Chernobyl was pretty much the most memorable mission of all time. For the Call of Duty series, but this one again has some fairly good ones. That being said, what are some interesting innovations in this game? Well, obviously you have a completely different weapon loadout. You are using the World War II era weapons, and it's funny that they seem to represent the Germans, Americans, British, Japanese, with their own distinct weapons for shotguns, snipers, assault rifles, and so on, and using their respective weapons in that conflict. Similar, however, they've adopted from Call of Duty Modern Warfare is now loadouts and multiplayer, so now things are much more streamlined with perks and different types of weapons and assault rifles. So again, you have your assault rifle class, your submachine gun class, LMG support class, shotgun, and sniper. Another cool addition, especially in the campaign in this game, is the use of the M2 flamethrower, which is just so much fun. It's probably one of my favorite. I just love using flamethrowers in games or fire weapons in general. It's just so cool to see that function, basically. What I don't like about the campaign is, again, I mean, this is when things were, I mean, I should have mentioned this in the Modern Warfare review, but this is when things kind of were getting gritty and pissed looking. So there's this joke about, this generation of consoles, in order for them to, in combination with the bloom of the Unreal Engine, next gen graphics, and also trying to make gritty, serious stories that appeal to, teenage boys, and games and simulations that are battle scenarios. Every game started to look brown and gray and a little bit of yellow. And this was kind of like the thing that just infected every game of that generation. And now we think that there might not be anything infecting this current generation, but what I have seen is someone brought up a really good point about the fact that most monitors now have switched from what was it? From CRT to plasma and LCD. And that means that blacks and whites don't really show up as strong as they used to. Blacks are kind of faded out a little bit, and the contrast on things is also kind of faded out. And so you'll see that in games now. There'll be this haze, this weird haze that is more so meant for LCD monitors rather than CRT. And so in general, games just look like they're faded out. They have less colors, and that's the thing that we're going to see kind of later after this generation's kind of done. Games might have a certain aesthetic that is usually kind of bright, flowy, flippant colors, like purples and yellows. I'm not sure if anyone else has noticed this, but that's kind of the aesthetic of certain games, and it just kind of, it's just very odd. It doesn't seem to flow with the rest of the gameplay, the types of games that are being portrayed. I think what really people remember from this game is the M1 Garand. The iconic clip sound when you reload and unload the gun is something that has definitely kind of become iconic. Something else that was a little bit different about this game is that it's a lot gorier than the other Call of Duties, where there might be a little bit of blood when you shoot someone. This game's explosives will actually have people's legs and arms come off, as well as I think if you also use the trench shotgun, either in multiplayer or single player, actually. But in single player, yeah, my favorite thing to do was my assault class. I used the Gewur assault rifle with the aperture sight, and the special thing I had on the side was a flamethrower. I loved using that thing. As I said, I just love seeing that kind of cool stuff. For my SMG class, I used the special toxic gas grenade along with the Thompson with the full drum magazine. For the LMG class, I definitely use the MG32, of course. And for my shotgun class, I'm pretty sure I used the double barrel shotgun, simply because it was just like friggin' fun to use. It's just ridiculous. If you're gonna bring a shotgun and it's a double barrel sawed-off shotgun, it's just so much fun to use something ridiculous like that. And for my sniper class, of course, I used the PSG-1, the kind of modern-ish semi-automatic rifle that was the precursor to a lot of modern rifles, sniper rifles, along with a throwable Tomahawk, I believe, and a Magnum. So multiplayer in this game was fairly good, fairly interesting. Another weird thing that this game had in multiplayer was vehicles. There were a couple of maps you could actually get in the tank, and it didn't work super well, but you could use it, and it was weird. And in fact, there were vehicle only perks for this game, which was found very odd, because it would be very rare you'd have to use it. There were only like a handful of maps where it actually had vehicles, and if you did get them, there were things like like increased speed and faster reloading times. And it was just very rare in general. But I think it's funny that they had that in the first place anyway. Again, I would say overall, this gameplay and its multiplayer was very fun, but not quite as fun as Modern Warfare. It had a certain vibe to it. I mean, honestly, I was talking about how World War II games are depressing. When I think about it, this game is super depressing. Like when you log into the main menu, it's like this, woman singing sorrowfully, and like the destroyed wreckage of like the war. It's all black and fire and ashes, and Like this game's entire tone is very just meant to be depressing to the player. I guess. I mean, I'm not sure it's meant to be that. I mean, I can't imagine what else it's trying to be. But yeah, it's like the chaos of war and all that. And then campaign itself, it's interesting. You know, you finally get to play as the Russians in the final level. And you know, well, in the American version, I think you bomb like an imperial palace or something and go out with a bang, and I think one of the characters dies. I don't really remember, honestly. I didn't care about the American campaign, but I didn't care about the Russian campaign, but I did care about Reznov. And Reznov, you finally do the final battle of Berlin, and you raise the communist flag above the Reichstag in Berlin, and that's the final aspect of the game that finishes everything off, and it's pretty cool. But I would have to say that playing that level, but playing any Call of Duty game on Veteran is hell. But playing the last mission of this game on Veteran is honestly unbearable. It is just ridiculously hard. If I had to compare the multiplayer of these two games, one of them, like Call of Duty, kind of feels, I don't know, it feels fresh and juicy. Modern Warfare, I mean. And this one, the Treyarch ones, feels kind of like a tin can. It feels kind of almost like bitter, almost, and not as. It doesn't feel sweet. It feels maybe a little bit spicy, if that's a way to even like describe the two. But yeah, I would enjoy the multiplayer for World at War, but I could never enjoy it as long as I would the other ones. It always felt, I don't know, I just felt bad after a while. It felt like the weapons were just made out of like aluminum or tin or something, and it just has this unfortunate vibe to it that it just feels broken, kind of, or like it feels the weapons are broken even though they're not, and can't hit your targets or something. While with Modern Warfare, everything's big and round and kind of juicy and something that you can really like, meaty. You can sink your teeth into it. Like all the guns have a good feeling to them, and it never feels like something like it's fired or something. That's like a very subjective feel that I'm bringing to this discussion. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. But I think it's time we talk about the real big reason why people love this game more. It's a sub game more than the game itself. So while this game was being developed, the developers, for fun on the side, were developing a joke version of the game for themselves. And on the side, they created this little project that got roped into the game overall, which was called Nazi Zombies. Yes, I know Nazi Zombies almost in itself is more popular than the Call of Duty series itself, which I find very funny. And so this version of the game, basically once you beat the main campaign, you go back to the main menu, it shows you this thing called, it has the whole title screen, and it shows, Nazi zombies, and you basically have to fight, these, the enemy soldiers, but now they just come at you. And this is the beginning of basically a huge, this could be a completely separate game, and in fact it has its own copycats, to the extent that you start off in this random bunker, and you can hold X to board up the wall so it stops them coming in from as fast. And it's basically their answer to Horde mode. Gears of War 2 at this time was doing a Horde mode, where basically you have waves and waves of infinite enemies, and you and a friend can survive together. And it was a super cool kind of bonding experience, because you just had each other, and you had to rely on each other. You had a point system. So this is kind of like the arcade or the mercenary mode of the game, where they were just having fun, and this whole system evolved and became a much bigger thing. And thanks to DLC and the internet, basically, they added more and more maps, and each one got better than the last, until eventually, by the time the last map was revealed, it became a staple in Call of Duty's franchise. Even in Call of Duty Ghosts, which was made by Infinity Ward, introduced a Horde mode featuring aliens instead of zombies, which, well, unfortunately was not as fun, but it became a staple all the same. So, zombies. Oh man, my personal story with this game is that my younger brother was absolutely addicted to this mode. Like, I would play it for maybe like an evening and be like, okay, cool, I'm good for like, a few months. Like, I don't need to keep playing it. But he was playing it almost every day. Like, not any different game, not even whatever. He would keep playing the exact same mode and the exact same maps, trying to get better and better and better. And to the point where I was actually so concerned, like as like this guy who like plays games all the time, I was actually so concerned that I decided to actually sell the game because it simply was just too much, just too much for him. I was like, you can't keep doing this. So in any case, Nazi Zombies, it's such a great mode because it balances time. Well, it doesn't balance time. It balances ammo and points, essentially. And so the big thing with zombies is that they had a random weapon box. So basically, as the zombies kept coming in different waves, a tally would appear on the bottom right corner of the screen. And after killing, each zombie, you realize things, certain strategies would work. Like if you knifed them or shot them a lot and then knifed them, you could maximize the amount of points you were getting. And by doing that, you got more points to spend on different weapons. And so each map was basically constricted to, there were weapons on the walls you could buy ammo for them. But then they added a random weapon box in the back room. And so you would also pay points to unlock different parts of the map, because the more area and space you have to navigate, the easier it is for you to fight the oncoming hordes. Because, if you, would kill enough, then basically you could get into a position where you could, optimize your spot. And in one room, there's a random weapon box where you would spend cash or, your points. And in doing so, you basically would create, a random weapon out of the box. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. But it could be anything. It could be anything really good and really bad. And so it was this one gambling, I guess, mechanic, which made the game super, super fun and super amazing. And, in doing this, people would keep replaying this mode in hopes that they would roll and get a really amazing weapon. And you could get really amazing weapons and totally tilt, the balance of the battle. And so you kept replaying it to see if you could get the best possible outcome. But if you died early, if there was something else, you always felt you could optimize it more. And it's funny, my brother did not stop playing the game until years later we bought it again, and he went back to it, and he was much better now because of just experience. And in this case, what he did was he essentially was able to optimize it to such an extent that he pulled out all the stops, and he got to wave like 35 or something on Duriz. And he was satisfied. Basically, he pack-a-punched the Wonder Waffle. He got all the perks. He did pack-a-punch the ray gun. He did every possible thing he could have done to make it work and to make it happen, which is just really cool. Oh god, something I forgot to mention about the multiplayer in this game that's really weird. So they did have kill streaks, but they did something really, I think, honestly strange. Where you had your UAV or your radar. And then instead of an airstrike, you had a motor strike. But then for the final one, instead of a helicopter, they called in dogs. So these rabid dogs would appear everywhere, and they would just maul everyone. I just think that's such a funny thing. That's your reward for getting 7 kills in a Call of Duty game, is you call in dogs, which is just crazy. But yeah, and as each Nazi Zombies map came out, you basically had, the introduction of perks. You can spend your money on different perks like, extra reload speed, faster bullet speed, more health, which was always the one you got, faster revive. And, as the story went on, well, there was a story kind of where, in the first game or in the first map, you were just nameless guys. In the second map, you were 2 Americans. It seemed like by the third map in Shinonuma, you were, for online multiplayer, you were a American, a Russian, a Japanese, and a German. And they kind of had the voice lines in these friggin' zombie maps were very funny. You'd have the communist Russian guy saying we should share the ammo. He says things about vodka. the American, is like, life, liberty, and bullets and stuff like this. Um, and so the dialogue, honestly, it was very kind of a little bit almost crass and brutish, but it was very kind of entertaining. And so throughout that whole kind of thing, they also introduced things like traps, and there was a little kind of a little zombies story that evolved. It was really something that didn't really need to be addressed because it's just a fun multiplayer thing. But they had this whole thing where, like, oh, the German guy, of course, was an evil scientist who had time traveled, whatever, using Nazi technology, and brought, these three war heroes to like some timeline where they have to fight zombies because that's where Nazi Germany won, and then all the soldiers became zombies or something stupid like that. And it's just something that didn't need a story, but you just knew that kids were making fan theories online. And by the time I think Black Ops or Black Ops 2 came around, they actually tried to have an actual story around these like four guys shooting zombies mindlessly forever. And it's just something that didn't need to be addressed. And from what I understood, I don't even understand or know of the story, honestly, because I stopped playing around Black Ops 2. So it was just something that didn't need to be addressed. And yeah, apparently even when they ended it, a lot of people were upset with the ending of it anyway. But yeah, what a shocker. But anyway, Nazi Zombies, I put a lot of time into that. That was a very fun multiplayer thing. I remember one thing that was very strange about it, though, is that it was only 2-player locally. And when you played locally, it had these huge, like, gradients on the side of the screen, or margins, rather, of, like, just like they're cutting off the screen. And I remember my friend called me like, "How do I get rid of them?" I'm like, "You can't. Like, I actually don't know how. It's stupid." Yeah, it was weird. But anyway, World at War. It's not the greatest game ever, not the worst game ever. It's definitely my favorite World War II shooter, I would say, more than the original Call of Duties. More than Wolfenstein even. I actually not a huge fan of Wolfenstein. So if you have to play World War II shooter, I would actually recommend this. Anyway, guys, I think that's it for this one. I'll see you guys later.